Hey guys, and welcome to episode 21 of Creators Campfire. I'm Barb, and tonight I am joined by product designer Nibras Ibnomer. Hi Nibras.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm a little bit tired, but I'm good. It's been a nice sunny day. I think it's our last 2 days of a late summer in the UK, so trying to make the most of it.
Yeah, no, it's true. I nipped outside earlier to the shops and I was like, oh, it's quite nice. And I was like, oh, it's not going to be for long. And also when I looked out the window last night, it was probably about this time actually, maybe about half an hour earlier. And I was like, it's getting darker. It's like summer is coming to an end and it makes me sad.
Same here. I'm a little bit scared, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
A little bit scared for the winter that's about to come upon us, but hopefully it'll be all right.
Yeah, well, fingers crossed. It should be very interesting. We'll just watch it unravel from the inside, at least.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Stay indoors. Okay, awesome. Right, we digress. So, to talk us through her creative workflow. So, guys, she has started this article that really got my attention, and it's not finished. But basically, it outlines her creative process. I guess the premise of it is that creativity is something that I guess comes to all of us in one form or another, whether you're like me and don't admit it, or whether you're like someone else and they're like, yes, I am creative. But at times it can feel like it's not on demand. And when it's your job, then sometimes it needs to be. So I think that's kind of where the article was coming from. And then you talk through kind of a process, which firstly just is quite surprising but refreshing, because I guess when it comes to creativity, you don't necessarily think, oh, there's a process. So what are your thoughts on having a process for creativity?
I think there is a creative process. I think a lot of the times it's intuitive. And so it's just, I want to say subconscious. Maybe subconscious isn't the word that I'm looking for. There is a process. And sometimes you're just living at the process. Your brain is doing all these things. But I do think it's, at least for myself, I can step back and see the patterns, and I can see the things that I do when I'm generating a lot of ideas, right? There are certain themes, there are certain spaces, certain kind of energy levels and headspaces. So I do think there is a process.
Yeah, no, to be honest, as someone who thinks they're not creative, it's, like I said, it's refreshing for me to know that there is a process, because that is what my brain gravitates towards. I'm like, oh, there's a process to be creative. Maybe I can do it, because it's like, this feels good. This feels like home.
Yeah.
So,
and I remember we chatted before, and I said you're an undercover creative, which I stand by. You're definitely a creative in denial.
I am definitely in denial, because it makes no sense to me. I'm like, give me something I can follow, or a blueprint, and I'll do it. To me, that's so uncreative. But,
right.
Yes, maybe you'll prove your point one day. But until then, I'm going to stay in denial. Yeah, I'm standing with it. Okay, so I guess where it starts is having these two modes, a closed mode and an open mode. And it kind of reminded me of a productivity book I read. It was a Chris Bailey one, Hyperfocus, where he talked about a hyperfocus mode, which I believe would be the equivalent of a closed mode, and an open mode, which is scatter focus, and how you need both to kind of come together and well, do anything, because you can't be in one mode or the other all the time. So do you want to just talk a bit more about those two modes and how they work?
Yeah, sure thing. So I was reading a piece by a friend 2 days ago that she's writing for a case study of hers. And I think she used the term like research mode or research phase, or like research thinking, in diffuse mode, which I also like as well. And one is very much, it's very tight and it is closed. Like closed mode is a good description. And it's if you kind of think of like your visual field when let's say you're sitting in your garden and you're just fascinated by we have tomato plants. So you're just really honed in on one of the tomatoes because you're like, oh, it's a bit green and it's half red. And, the world falls away and all you can see is that tomato and you keep zooming in on all its details. That's the equivalent of the focus or like the close mode for me, which is I have a goal, I have a target, I have a set object that I'm focused on. And whether that's like reading a piece to find an answer or whether it's coming up with, or I don't know, editing a specific sentence, it's just a very target oriented, and everything that I'm doing is focused on moving this single element forward, right? So my brain is just it has its thing, it knows what it's doing. And then the kind of open mode or this kind of diffused thinking, as my friend had written, which I really like, is, for me, it reminds me of being like 4 years old and lying down on the floor and looking up at the ceiling and just seeing all these shapes and watching the shapes change and kind of play. And, it's when you're sitting in the garden again, you're in the hammock and you're just looking up at the trees and you have this wide open sense of everything around you, right? That's kind of like the meditation reference. And when it comes to creative work or to work in general, that open mode for me is when I'm not trying to answer a specific question or to like tick a box, but I'm just going for a walk and I have the general theme in mind. And in that moment, my brain is thinking about 100 different things and bringing ideas together and remixing them. So that's the kind of description I'd go for right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess, again, what we're saying is that you actually need both modes. It's not like all of creativity happens in one mode or the other.
Yeah.
It's actually the whole process. It requires you to kind of flip between one and the other. It's just knowing which parts need what. And therefore, just actually while we're on that, how do you do you have periods of the day that you know that you are better in one mode or another? So some people say I'm more creative in the evening or I'm more productive, so to speak, in the morning. Do you have those kind of times and are you aware of them?
Yeah. So I'm just excellent at everything after like midnight, which is not helpful. So from midnight to 6 a.m. I can basically have an idea and take it to completion, and it just feels great, and I'm like full of energy and inspiration and ideas, and it's just a very good time to be making work. And so in university that was cool because I could write my dissertation from midnight till 6 a.m. In kind of like adult life, not so good anymore. So yeah, that's, in an ideal world, that would be my window for maybe more. I think I swing quite fluidly between diffuse mode or open mode and closed mode during those hours. Like it starts off very full of inspiration, and then I don't know, it's whether like as my brain gets more tired, I can just focus on one task after the next, rather than kind of being overwhelmed by a lot of ideas. I'm not sure what happens there. Aside from that, I don't have set times of day, but I do have activities and spaces that will trigger one mode or the other, and certain environments. So for example, like at my last job, we were based in Soho, and there's in the middle of Soho this square that's kind of a small park, but it's very open, considering everywhere else is like really closed and you have buildings all around you. And so I can just walk there and stand there, and because it's so visually open, that will put me in a different headspace. And now I'm having lots of ideas.
Oh, okay, that's quite cool. So I'm, again, you're just going to say something to me, but I don't know necessarily when my, so to speak, most creative time is. Sometimes I'm like, maybe it's first thing in the morning, and sometimes it's like, it comes 10 o'clock and it's like bedtime, and I'm like, nah, I'll just really quickly do something. And I don't know if that's me just putting off sleep, or if actually those are the quieter times in the day, and therefore everything else kind of falls away because nothing else needs to be done in those times. But are
Yeah.
there ways to kind of really find that out, or is it just kind of playing with it and seeing where it goes?
Yeah, so I'm the same as you. The quieter it is, the more creative I can be. And well, actually, I say that, and then I'm going to contradict myself, because sometimes, like, having a brainstorming session with 3 other people is just like creativity after, a bottle of Red Bull or something. It's very intense in that way. To answer your question, though, I think the answer to a lot of these things is it really helps to start from the bottom up and spend a lot of time observing yourself and almost collecting data on yourself. And I think we maybe spoke about this a little bit. I don't remember, but like I spent like 2 years being a little bit crazy and almost keeping close to, not all the time, but like almost keeping a spreadsheet on myself and just watching the things that I do. Yeah. And the sort of activities that I get very lost in, and I feel very much in the flow when I'm doing. And I find it's time consuming for sure, but it really pays off, and it's a very helpful way of just knowing for sure when you work, right? You're studying yourself. And I think it was Jim Collins who has something called a bug book, where he looks himself as if he's a bug, which sounds like a really funny idea, but I quite like it. And, he'll just every day he'll write like, today the bug drank a glass of water and then was clear-headed for an hour.
Yeah, okay.
Like a really intense way to approach it. But I think a gentle version of that is really helpful, and just watching yourself over time.
Interesting. Yeah, there's a lot of people that are pro time tracking or doing that, and I want to, but also can't be bothered. But I know it will pay off, because I try and do it without tracking. I try and just be aware of things. Like at work, I'm like, am I more productive in the morning, or is it? I know that period after lunch is a no-go for most things.
Right.
An hour. But beyond that, sometimes I'm productive in the morning, and sometimes I can be quite productive in the evenings, like the afternoons, and I can't kind of gauge it, but maybe I do need to play around. Plus, I get other data that sits in there, right? Like sleep and food and exercise.
Yeah. And maybe it doesn't have to be as restrictive or time consuming as time tracking, right? Maybe it can be a few notes when you journal, and then over time looking at, like, if it's a sentence each day, and you're just trying to observe one aspect of yourself, that can also give you quite a lot of softer data that I think is nicer to collect.
That's a good point. I need to pay more attention, because I really want to get this down. It really annoys me. Okay, enough about me. So going back to the actual process then. So if I can count, I think you listed out 7 different phases of it. Is it cool to just go through them in order, or is there a better approach?
Yeah, we can do that. I'm just flicking to the doc as well, by the way, so I can look at it with you. But yeah, we can go through them in order.
Okay, awesome. So it starts with a question or a challenge. And I guess this one is fairly self-explanatory in that you have a brief, or you have something you're trying to solve. So I don't know if there's more to add around that one.
Yeah, I think that's pretty straightforward, right? There's a brief, there's something you're trying to solve, or it can be a personal question as well, kind of like answering the question of when am I most creative, or how do I become more creative? That's a design challenge in a brief in and of itself, right?
Yes. Okay. Yes, that's true. I am going to work it out, I promise. Okay. And then we go on to the research phase.
Right.
Now, I'm a researcher naturally, and again, I don't know if it's procrastination of the bigger issue, but I love getting stuck into this particular phase. But I have no defined approach to it though, and I have no time scale. So I guess there may be 2 big things. But how would you approach then this section once you've kind of got what you're trying to solve?
Mm-hmm. Sure. So first, getting some sort of clear question is really helpful. The research phase is I think I'm the same as you. I really enjoy it, and it feels quite natural, right? And for me, it helps to remember that so many other people have probably solved the problem that I'm trying to solve. So I should see what their solutions are at first. Um, and it's something I'm doing so much and so often that it's kind of hard to pin down. It's anything from like, what books do I have in my library, and what book relates to this question that I'm trying to answer. More recently, it's like, what notes do I already have in my Rome research that relate to this topic? And usually when I click on my Rome, there are definitely patterns and cycles of interest and sorts of questions for me, right? So I'll go in and it's like, oh, okay, I have like 70 links about embodiment and like 20 pages of notes, and I can just use that directly. So that's quite nice recently. Other things that are really helpful are like Twitter is great. I've also gotten into the habit of just asking questions on Twitter and letting people direct me to sources and books, and even just answering questions themselves. And so I've sometimes just said, like, I'm even trying to figure out a UX problem. Can someone jump on a call with me? And that's research, which is really great. And I'm super, super happy to be able to do that through Twitter. Other forms of research. I don't know. I think the rest will be, yeah, just very much overlaps. It's the research that you do as well and that I do as well. And I think a lot of us tend to be pretty big into it.
Yeah. This is a problem that troubles me. Like I said, I can sometimes spend too long on this phase. How do you kind of set the boundaries or stop that from happening?
Yeah. It's super easy to do that because it's so much fun, right? Like, I'm just having a good time,
right?
It's helping me to, like, one of the big focuses I have right now is shipping faster, to use Seth Godin's term, right? Like, I want to move through projects much faster because I see the benefit of that and I get so much more energy from it. So with that as a focus, just like having a really clear deadline for the project will really help shorten the research window. Other things that help, the other thing that's been really helpful actually is when I think of like the UX process, or I think of the design thinking process, one thing that was really hammered into me from the various books that I read and just everything that I came across is that research can keep coming back in throughout the process. And for me, that helps me stop researching, right? So like I can do a day or two of research and feel very comfortable knowing that I can probably do some more research 7 days down the line when I'm a lot clearer on what I'm looking for.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. It's not a closed, this is over and done with.
Exactly.
I can't go back to it. It's okay, I've got enough to get started and gain some traction. Now, let's move on to the next stage and almost just keep going back to it as and when it's like that iterative process, right?
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's actually very useful. But the other thing you just mentioned, Rome research, I'm gonna like go off on a tangent here and talk apps. So
nice.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so firstly, do you use other apps other than Rome research before I start digging into that one?
Oh God, I'm like Twitter is very crazy about Rome right now.
Yes, they love
I'm very, very crazy about Rome. Yeah, I'm deeply in love with Rome and the team and everything that they're doing. I think they're creating something beautiful. So Rome, diehard fan, and that's definitely the top of my stack. And I think I've used it for about a year now or so, I want to say, or maybe just under that. So it's in that year slowly eaten everything else that I use. So before that, I used to use a to-do list app. I used to use Scrivener for some writing as well, and a few other apps. But now a lot of that I just do in Rome and use templates. Anything else that I'm using regularly? Well, I use Figma as a design tool, but that's a bit more specific. And I use a mix of browsers as well. But again, that probably doesn't relate too much to this, I'd say.
Okay, so your kind of second brain or whatever, so to speak, is Rome. That's your go-to.
Yeah, absolutely. By now, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I haven't converted.
Right.
I've heard a lot about it, and I've been very tempted.
Yeah.
I'm currently a Notion fan.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
Been, for a while. Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know if you saw the article from, it's a Nest Labs article about the 3 different types of people, right? And I was like, that's why I, I was like, that's why I like Notion. I was like, makes sense now. But in terms of Rome, what is it that you like most about it and that you wouldn't necessarily get elsewhere?
Oh, I'm just like, okay, Nibras, don't go off too much. What do I like most about Rome? I think, again, I'm just going to sound like I'm parroting the hype machine, you know, but for me, it's the best. It's the first, and I wouldn't even call it a note-taking tool, but, you know, just kind of web app thinking tool that does really mimic the way that my brain works. And so I think I forced myself to be an architect for a really long time, but being a gardener feels so much better, right? To use the Nest Labs sort of metaphor. And so Rome frees me from that need to impose structure and to impose hierarchy. And because of the way my brain works, which is just sometimes a lot of disjointed, rapid fire ideas coming up randomly throughout the day, Rome is really beautiful. I don't have to, an idea comes up and I can just put it down in the daily notes and trust that over time, everything's organizing itself. And then I can go in and find patterns and find themes. I really like Notion as well, because I really like pretty looking things. And so I like Notion as, again, remembering a friend's article, he described it as, you know, Notion is like the storefront and Rome's the workshop, right? And so Rome's where you come in and you're cutting the wood and you have your metal everywhere and you're putting things together. Yeah. And Notion is where you display things quite beautifully for people to come and interact with. And I quite like that.
That's actually very cool. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So, I'm attempting to build the Notion version of what people get in Rome.
Yes,
it's Notion, because it's just, like I said, it's the way that my brain works, and I know that other people have done it. So it kind of goes back to that Slipbox idea or Zettelkasten or whatever you want, right? It's all these nuggets of information that you get, and it's kind of storing them and then trusting that you can go back. And I guess that's the difference between Rome and Notion, is that it's already built in Rome.
Right.
There's like no thinking, you go.
Exactly.
Whereas Notion, you have to build it up to match what you want to do.
Right.
But, okay, that's very interesting.
What do you like about Notion?
I like the structure.
Right.
So again, I like pretty things and I like them to look good. And if something doesn't look good, I don't want to use it.
Yeah, so I get that.
I'm not a huge fan of like the whole markdown text editing. So like, for instance, drafts is great for just jotting down ideas. But when I look at my notes, I'm like, I can't look at this, because I just want to bold this and make this colorful and pull out things here and there, and I can't do that.
Right.
And it kind of bugs me that my notes don't look pretty. There must be some connection that it helps me connect things when I can play around with it and pull things out. I'm sure I would get on with Rome if I gave it the time, because like you said, the idea of just going through the day and dumping things down is good. But I guess the other thing that Notion forces me to do is actually review them. Right. So I will go through my day and do my brain dump and jot down random ideas. But where I want to get to is that I'm reviewing them at the end of the day, because half of them could be crap. And I'm definitely a minimalist and I hate waste. So the idea that there's a bunch of things out there that mean nothing, or I can't really remember, or just make no sense to me, I'm like, no, I don't want them in my thing. I need to get rid of them. So yeah, but also I can put, I'm an analyst, so I can put stats in there and stuff, right, and create tables, and that makes me very happy. So I have now my daily page where I can go in and write all sorts of potentially pointless stats about my sleep and my mood and, you know, that sort of stuff. But it's separated and it's in blocks rather than free form. That just makes me happy because it's organized.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense to me. By the way, side note, +1 point for you being a creative. You know, you like to make colorful pages and bold everything out and make it look nice. That's another.
I mean, I'm giving myself away. A point from me is it doesn't actually look as good as I want it to look.
Right.
But yeah, like you see some pages and you're like, oh damn.
Yeah.
But again, the reason, right? But the reason I don't, again, it keeps coming back. The reason I think, I'm not that creative is because I can't do that without seeing other people's things. Like my mind doesn't envision it until I see it. So I can't come up with an idea, but when I see it, I can take it, adapt it to my own needs. But I think I said this to you last time when we spoke. Yeah. I can't think outside the box. I'm very, you know, like here, this is how it's always been done. This is how you do it. And until I see another use case, I'm like, there's no other way of doing it, guys. And it's like, someone's done it. Okay, now I can see it.
Right. I do feel like that's, again, I do feel like that's how you build up a library, right? Like you learn language by growing up hearing sounds for a very, very long time. And you spend like, I don't know however long it is before babies can speak their first word, just soaking in language, soaking in these sounds. And then you start to mimic. And then you mimic words and sentences. And then eventually you start, you know, forming your own sentences and trying to express this like internal subjective experience that you have using this tool that you have. And I think the same thing in my mind applies to all forms of creativity, right? So like, I'm sure right now you're seeing Notion templates and you're seeing all the things that you can do. And, you know, I'd be willing to bet money that like in 2 years of doing that or however long it is, you'll start making your own completely new templates by remixing everything. And to me, that is creativity, right? It's just taking everything that exists and remixing it so that it suits you or so that it moves through kind of your filters and your experiences.
Okay, you might be winning here. Valid point. Okay. Let's come back from the nerd sidetrack.
Yes. By the way, you can review in Rome if you want. I'd be super happy to do like a Rome run through for you. Okay. Not to be adamant on converting you, but can definitely show you how like daily reviews and weekly reviews and kind of bringing up notes again, resurfacing them, how that works and how it can be set up.
That would be cool, actually, because one thing that I want to do that I haven't yet incorporated into my kind of weekly whatever is the weekly review.
Right.
So yes, I'll do my end of day little checklist and, you know, the usual gratitude and those kind of things.
Right.
And this is what I want to do is have like, this is what I've learned, or these are the things that the more creative-y things, so to speak.
Right.
Here's what I learned this week. Here's what I found out. Here's the thoughts that popped into my head. That kind of review to me would be super useful. So yeah, good shout. Maybe let's do that. That would be fun. Okay, cool. So, okay, next up is incubation, which I like because my mind went, oh, no work. But I don't. Again, this isn't a new idea, but
yep,
it's kind of like you're kind of staring at it and you can't think of anything or whatever, or you're maybe stuck, or you get to a point where you're like, I'm just going around in circles, or I'm not actually moving the needle, so to speak. I'm just doing, which I do all the time with my spreadsheets, and I will get so into it that I'm like, hang on, take a step back. You've done nothing in the last hour other than, you know, mess with that. So the whole incubation idea is to just step back and take a break, right?
Exactly. Step back and take a break. I can talk about continue.
No, go on, you go.
No, you go ahead, I insist.
Okay. Oh, I now can't remember where I was going. Yeah. Oh, so how do you know when you need to take a break?
Cool. Good question. So how do I know when I need to take a break? I think it's exactly as you described it, like when the effort that I'm putting in is just not worth the results that I'm getting. Like it's 7 p.m. or it's 7:30 or it's 8 and I should definitely be leaving the office. I mean, you should always be leaving the office before that, but I've just been like staring at this piece of paper for an hour and a half and I'm making such little progress. And that's just a very clear sign that like things need to stop. I've just ran out of juice for that day or it's not going to go any further. Sometimes as well, like a kind of particular type of frustration, or sometimes getting caught up in a loop where I'm just coming up with the same idea or same answer again and again and again, and I'm not seeing any other opening is also a clear sign. The other more recent development as well is that I'm becoming a lot more kind of wooey and feely. And if we'd had this conversation a year ago, I would have like been really giving you some like really full-on answers when it came to like what tools I was using and what tech I was using. And this year it's a lot more like I pause and I feel into my body and I see what my body feels like. And if it's very tired and quite heavy and quite tense, it's probably time for me to stop. And I'm trying to just use a bit more of that as a kind of director.
That's quite a skill though, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't think I could do that.
I think definitely like a bit of meditation helps, but also just a lot of doing it. Like a lot of just being like, it sounds strange, but like, what does my hand feel like right now? Like, what's the experience of my hand and getting a sense of that and then just like expanding that outwards to encompass more of your body. It's like, okay, what does that feel like? What word can I use to describe it? And starting to take that more as truth than the thought in my head, because usually the thought in my head says, keep going. And it's very often the body saying, nah, like we've gone too far now, let's relax.
Okay, I actually probably have the opposite problem because I'm incredibly lazy. So if there's any chance I can stop, I'm like, yeah, I'm out.
Like that. I think it's a great problem to have, honestly.
Well, you say that, but it's so irritating when you know. So it could be like 2-3 o'clock in the afternoon, and like I said, I'm a 5:30 shut down kind of person. And I'm like, okay, I've got a couple of hours and I've got this thing to do, and I'm just like, and I'll dawdle, and I'm like, why? And then I end up staying till 6:30 because I'm like, I totally screwed around. And then I'm like, I'll just do it tomorrow, right? Because it's 6:30 and my brain is dead and I just need food at that point.
Yep.
So yeah, it's not great.
But I don't think it's like a reflection on you. I don't think it says anything bad about you. I think it's probably just a sign of a system that's functioning really well. Like I was having a very short conversation before we had this call with somebody who had a report to work on. And, and she was saying there was a lot of back and forth and she'd kind of like left it to the last minute. And it's like, well, yeah, of course you have. This isn't a thing that you would choose to do for fun. Like no part of your brain or body would choose to spend their time this way if you had the option. And so, of course, the only time you're going to do it is when there is like a real hard, sometimes scary deadline, if there's no intrinsic interest or motivation, right? So that to me just feels like, okay, that's how a healthy human being functions in this kind of system that we're in.
That's a very good point, because if I was working on something I enjoyed, I wouldn't be putting it off. I'd be like, yes. This is fun. And I don't want to stop. Food, what's that?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, no, that's a very, very valid point. Okay, cool. So next up, and I think this is kind of a bit more of the interesting part of the process is the generation, I guess, of ideas, unless I'm being really stupid.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, cool. Okay, so you have a question or you have a brief or whatever you're trying to solve. You've done a bunch of research just to get you started. if at any of that point, you needed a break or whatever, and I guess the incubation period pops up again and again rather than it being its own necessarily phase. And now it's time to actually do some work, right? And start to solve the problems. What does that look like, and how do you start?
Sure. So before I go into that, I'd say like with what I think of as like incubation, or what I'm calling incubation here, I think it's good to take breaks. I think that part is actually more disengaging and letting go of the problem or the thing that you've been focusing on. And so it's a very active phase of inactivity. For me, it's like a thing where the more time I give myself away from consciously working on this problem, the better the generation phase is. And like the really extreme version of this, like incubation, is I played around like a few months ago with doing the first stages, right? So like getting a question, researching it, and what I do, which is wild and worked so beautifully, is before I'd go to bed, I'd write down a question. And so maybe the question is like, I have a campaign to work on tomorrow, and I have this client and I have this object, and I need to come up with some sort of video campaign, for example, let's say. And while I'm just awake, I can't really come up with anything that interesting. And I'll pose a question and I'll go to sleep. I won't do anything. And I wake up in the morning, and first thing in the morning, I'll have like 3 incredible ideas that are better than anything that I can come up with during my day. And that's the most extreme use of that sort of incubation phase married with that generation phase. And it worked so well. There were so many good campaigns that literally came out of just going to sleep and waking up in the morning and saying like, okay, what's here? Write it down. And then let's take that and work it out.
That's very cool. Do you find you go to bed actively thinking about it, or you literally just write the question down and forget about it?
Yeah, so I write the question down quite like almost 2 or 3 minutes before it's really head on the pillow, time to sleep.
Yeah.
And then I don't control it very much. And then I kind of just let my mind do what it wants to do. If it wants to ruminate and fixate on a question, it can. And if it wants to, drift off somewhere else, that's okay as well.
That's very cool. I might try that.
It's so much fun. Try it.
Yeah.
And then you'll be like, this is magic. This is what it is.
Okay, give me a question. I don't have one. I have nothing that needs solving right now.
Your question can be, am I creative? And then tomorrow you'll wake up and the answer will be like, yes, in 3 different languages.
Yeah, okay, fine. I'll let you know if that happens. Okay, cool. I've lost my thought process. Where was I?
Well, so next was generation, which I can jump right into because I kind of went back and came back around. So generation is a lot of fun, and there are so many things you can do here. I do definitely like the go to sleep method. That's my favorite. It's excellent when it works. And generation is, we go back to that open mode, which, like I said, is kind of playful. It's silly. There usually is time pressure, but some way, somehow you want to make yourself feel as if there isn't time pressure. And here let me pause and actually think about the words that I'm saying. I think here it comes back to that remixing that we were speaking about earlier, right? So you have your research, you have your question, you have your various elements, and you can add them together. You can subtract one from the other. You can play games. You can have conversations. I like to go on walks, and again, to really lean into what for now I'm calling woo, because I don't have the language or the evidence aside from my own experience to explain it. But one thing that I've really enjoyed playing with for generation is using movement and noticing that if I'm sitting down at my desk and I'm trying to come up with 20 ideas for a platform that we're building, or a feature on that platform, I come up with very different ideas sitting down than I do if I walk around the entire office, than I do if I skip around the office while everyone else looks at me like I'm crazy. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm like, yes, I am. You're right. Exactly. Look, you want good ideas?
Yeah.
Let me skip. And then I do if I go for a walk around a part of the city and I change the pace of that walk. And it's really interesting to play around with how moving your body in different ways changes the types of ideas that you generate. So I quite like that approach. There's a whole list that I will add to this article and then I'll share with you that I wrote down for myself. And I wrote it down specifically when I got very, very stuck. And, so one of them could be like, reverse the idea. Let's say the idea is that you have this podcast where you interview people, and the reverse would be you bring in people and they interview you. And the podcast is always you, and you're always being interviewed by a different person. And how does that change you and change the answers that you give and what comes out of that, right? And so that's just one tool. It would be cool, wouldn't it? It would be quite a lot of fun, actually. Yeah.
I mean, not with me because I hate being interviewed, but that's a very cool idea. I like it.
Yeah, and so there are lots of little, you can call them like jams or kind of cards or tools that you can use for changing the shape of an idea and pushing it in different directions. Yeah, I'd say that about covers it for that sort of generation period or generation phase.
That's okay. That's cool. I have a question. So,
yeah,
it kind of goes back to the two modes, and maybe probably how I am as a person. But if I'm sitting down at my desk, and actually maybe environment as well, kind of exactly what you're saying. If I'm sitting down at my desk, I don't necessarily have ideas. But like you said, if I'm walking around, things will pop into my head.
Yes.
But the second I go to write them down, I lose that creativity. But then if I don't write them down, I'm going to forget them. What is the solution? I need some kind of Iron Man, like, assistant in my head that's like, okay, I got it. Because the ideas in my head, like, I'll start writing emails to people in my head, and I'm like, okay, this is perfect. It's worded great. And I'll go and sit down and I'll go to write, and I'll be like, this is nothing like I thought. And what is this? This is rubbish. So how do you fix that?
I spend so much of my life like diving towards my phone or a notepad. Just like in an ever state of like, where's the nearest thing that I can write on? Exactly. It's like just jot it down as quickly as possible, which is risky and very dangerous, but it seems to be the only way to capture all these mad ideas. I find like when you're walking, I've been using voice notes and recordings a lot more, and using in particular an app called Otter, which is really great. Yeah, because you get your audio recording. Exactly. And you get your transcription as well. And so I've done a fair bit of that. It's also surprisingly useful to just talk to your phone as you walk. And it's a very different way of generating ideas. So that's pretty cool. Like I said, lots of diving and grabbing the nearest.
Okay, well, that's cool. Because I did go through it wasn't even a phase. It was literally, I tried it twice. I tried the voice notes thing. So with draft, obviously the voice notes or whatever. But by the time I'd spoken it, it was almost the exact same as me writing it down. I'm like, I've completely, but maybe if I was continually just talking to myself, then there's no break. It's talking out loud. I might try it. I wonder if it'll be any different.
Give it a try. Do a bit of walking, talking as you walk for like 15, 20 minutes and see how it feels. The other thing that I'd say is notice the difference between when you're having an idea and you haven't attempted to capture it, so there is no critic and editor. The critic or editor is still like asleep or inactive. And I think what happens for me and for a lot of people as well is the second you try and write it down, that's when the critic wakes up. And I think that's sometimes why it can lose that feeling of magic, because before it was pristine and unjudged and just this like pretty newly born baby, right? And the second it comes into the world, your critic is like, I don't like its hair and its feet are too big. And then you lose that lovely feeling and it's, oh, okay, I don't like this anymore. So maybe notice if a bit of that is happening.
That is definitely happening. Wow, that was a light bulb moment there.
Nice.
Yeah. It is, because the second I start to write that, I'm editing as I'm writing.
Yep.
Because I'm like, oh no, not that. And that's probably exactly what breaks my flow.
Yes.
Because, man. Okay, that was a great moment. Thank you for that. We definitely knew it. I don't know how to fix it, but at least I know what the issue is.
Just this is the thing that like I've put a lot of time into and a lot of experimentation in trying to get ideas out, and also just to make, without having that critic quite as active. And two things have helped. One is genuinely and truly lowering your standards and accepting that things are just like, things can be shit and that's okay, because over time they become really good, and like really starting to feel that. And I think that shift in feeling comes from letting yourself like write a ton of really bad ideas and produce a ton of really bad work. And over time it becomes okay, because you realize like, oh, I can have bad ideas and people still love me and I don't lose my job and I don't die, nothing bad in life happens. And I think what would the other part of that be? So one is just do it a lot and do bad things a lot. And the other is, like if you can slow it down in the moment and quite actively, actually, when your critic says, no, that's bad, write down the very thing that it says is bad and make that quite an active exercise. And just say like, okay, cool, I hear you. Thank you very much for your opinion. And continue to write down the next 3-4 words and see what that feels like over time. I'd be really curious to hear.
Me too. It's probably not going to be nice words. Okay. That's actually, okay. I'm so going to do that. That was a great moment. Okay, awesome. I've just realized the time and we have 3 phases left. So,
cool, yeah.
So you've got discernment, iteration, and refinement. Go.
Yes. Cool. So generation, thing that I missed, and it ties like quite nicely with what we were saying. During that generation phase, you really just want to let go of your standards. Like all ideas are welcome. Nothing is bad. Everything is allowed in the space, and there is no judgment. There is no cutting or editing yet. And so it's really a way to kind of, for me at least, to purge my mind and okay, get all the crappy stuff out. And eventually there will be some like kind of cool stuff. And so after that generation phase, you usually have like piles of notes and stuff all over the whiteboard and stuff all over your docs on your laptop. And so the next phase is, here's when the editor is really helpful. And here I feel is like one of the areas in life where the editor should be, but instead it like moves into all parts of life where it shouldn't really be, And so I like to think of it as like inviting the editor in and being like, you know what, like you're great, and this is where you're great, this is where you kill it. And so now you have this pile of work, and the next phase is just going through it and doing the thing that you're really good at, which is using your taste and using your discernment to say good, bad, good, bad, good, bad. And you whittle down your selection until you have however many ideas or pieces that you need or artifacts that you need. And so that's discernment, very straightforward. Next, you have iteration, which is when things start becoming really cool. And that's when, for me, like I get excited and I start to think like, okay, I'm making something good now. It's during that iterative phase. And so again, you can apply a bit of what you do during the generation phase, right? Which you can ask things like, or use how might we questions, or use that reverse method, or use subtraction, and take the ideas that you've selected and just play with them, experiment, see how many versions of them you can create, see how far you can push them. And again, a little bit more discernment. And then finally you reach the last stage, which is refinement. And again, I think this is where a lot of us are very good, I reckon, at discernment because we're doing it all the time. We're always judging ourselves and everything that we make. And refinement, I find a lot of us are naturally very good at as well because we're constantly exposed to very high quality art and media and projects. And so we have excellent taste and we have a brain that knows how it can improve everything. And here is like one area where you can really use that to your advantage. And so for me, it just feels like letting my brain do what it wants to do all the time, right? It's just like, here's a world, tell me how I can make it better. And you know, now you're kind of focusing on details. Maybe at this stage, if it's a design project, I'm testing colors against each other. I'm playing with just small changes in typography. If it's a video campaign, I'm refining parts of the script. I'm selecting, specific elements of the environment or like objects that I want in the studio. And so it's just, cute little touches that bring everything together.
So a similar question to one I asked earlier about research. How do you, again, you put a constraint on it, but how do you not carry on refining to the point where it's just like ridiculous? Because I guess there's that perfectionist in a lot of us that doesn't really know necessarily when to call it quits, and it will never actually be perfect. So what's the kind of, this is good enough, still great, but like it's not going to be, you know, it's not worth the extra effort to start putting in to do anything else.
Yeah. So I think it does come with time and confidence, and so much of this, for me, so much of creativity and production and making is deeply, deeply tied with emotional well-being and self-image and confidence and security. And without going off too much on a tangent, but in my mind, they are very, very strongly linked. The healthier I am emotionally and the more confident I am, the better I am at doing all of these things, because the more willing I am to create a piece of work that isn't perfect and push it out. And I say that it's still incredibly hard. It's so tough. It's the toughest part of it all. And so that's one aspect of it, is I just find, the more of this emotional work I do, the better I get at being able to say, okay, no, this needs to go live, and people will think what they think of it, and the next one will be better. And then the other easier thing to do is, well, there are a few things you can do. So one, like social accountability is fantastic. So I've been doing a lot more learning groups and study groups and kind of making groups. And I have people who will see my draft when I create it and who know what deadline I'm working towards. And so they'll message me and say like, hey, you've been working on this, which my friends did a lot when I was working my portfolio, and they're like, it's been 2.5 months, like, where are you? What progress have you made? And so you can really use other people for that. Again, Twitter's super cool for social accountability, because you can just say, and someone will flag you 3 weeks later and say, hey,
you said this.
Yeah, exactly. So for personal projects, it's really good to do that. And there are lots of other ways that you can make quite public, sort of public promises and then have to deliver on them, which I think is helpful. I think finally working on, like, having external deadlines is really helpful. It will just, you have 3 weeks, you don't have an option, you have to deliver. And for that reason, working on real world projects, and by that I mean things that affect other people, where other people depend on you, really helps with that, because someone's waiting to use this thing that you're making. And so you can't spend half a year perfecting it. You just need to give them something usable. And so it goes out that way.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, okay. Accountability.
Yeah, accountability is great.
Yeah. Do you have any book recommendations around these kind of things, especially for non-creatives, but just kind of to help with the process, or to help with aspects of the process, like the generation phase or those kind of things?
Mm-hmm. Good question. So I'll start off with maybe the slightly more kind of emotional side, and then get more into the kind of like design thinking side. There's a little book called Art and Fear,
Okay.
and it's very small. It's only like maybe 200 pages or so, or less than that. And in it, these two artists talk about teaching a group of students, a group of art students, and it's just these notes and tips and advice. But I really think it applies to everyone. And so one of the stories that you'll see quoted quite a lot from that book is two groups of students are given an assignment and the assignment changes, but it's like take a number of photographs, and one group of students is marked on the quality of their photographs, and the other is marked on the quantity of their photographs, right? And so that story comes out of that book. It's one of those stories where you read it and it instantly makes you shift your priority. And instead of focusing on creating one beautiful artifact, now your energy goes into creating as many artifacts as you can because that's what leads to quality, which is what the story then goes on to conclude.
I do love
so that. I think really, really lovely book, and I think most people will relate to it regardless of what work they do, because you'll see, all the struggles of making art, or the struggles of writing an article or building a platform or running a side project or a small business. So Art and Fear is really, really great. The Artist's Way is also another really great book. I think for people to recover their creativity and kind of do a lot of, I don't want to use the word healing, but I'm going to use the word healing, kind of in that area, almost reintegrate that aspect of themselves. Other books. I think in general, reading about the design process, so like not even books now, but just reading about IDEO's design process or the design council's design thinking process is really helpful. And it'll give you a framework that you can just apply to your own life and your own area of expertise. And so I think that's great. Other recommendations. I'm very conflicted about this one, but I am so conflicted. So design of everyday things is often very much like it's a very highly recommended book, and I do think that when you read it, it shifts your thinking, and you start to consider the way objects are designed, but you also apply that thinking to, again, your own skills and crafts and artifacts. I'd say probably just listen to the audiobook. Like, you don't even have you don't have to read the book. I have a lot of opinions there. And yeah, I'll leave it at those.
Okay, no, that's very cool. And I think you made a really good point is, yes, we're talking like a specific creative process here, but actually the process itself is for like a lot of things. It could be applied to so many different things. It's not like, only use this process if you're a writer or a painter or something. Actually, it applies to everyday problems and everyday people, and it's just a framework. And you don't have to go to the nth degree with it, but as a general overarching kind of process, that it's incredibly helpful. Awesome. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, it has been. It's always really nice talking to you.
You too, and thank you for taking us through that. I have picked up lots of little nuggets there, and I'm going to have to go back and make notes. And I've also got some book recommendations, which always makes me happy. So
I can look through my list and like send you some proper book recommendations rather than off the top of my head. Yeah, we can chat about that later on.
Yeah, no, perfect. That would be awesome. Yeah, there's so many books. Some are just. Do you ever do that thing where you buy a crap load of books and you're like, I really want to read them, but I buy more books than I can read? It's like
all the time. Okay. And it feels good every single time. You're like, my babies, the joy.
I need these books, okay? Exactly. Awesome. Nibras, thank you so much for joining me tonight and taking me through that process. Guys, whether you're watching live or watching on the replay, thanks for watching. And if you want to go and follow Nibras, I will link up everything in the description below. But you can go and check her out on Twitter. Is probably the easiest place to find you. And it's at, I'm going to get this wrong, Nibras IBN.
Yeah, you got it right.
Excellent. But I will link Nibras's article, the website, and her Twitter handle all in the description, so you can just click it. But otherwise, thanks again, Nibras. It was lovely talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
No worries. And guys, I'll see you same time, same place next week. Have a good evening, guys. Bye.